A very warm welcome to you all. My name's Harleen, and I'll be your host for today's session. I hope that you're all having a wonderful day so far and are now excited and ready for the brand new informative session of the Masterclass series organized by the Institute of Product Leadership. Before we begin today's insightful session, I'd like to give you all a quick introduction to the Institute. The Institute of Product Leadership is Asia's first business school providing accredited degree programs and certification courses in product management, product leadership, data science, design, strategy, and leadership. The institute has partnered with multiple universities and was founded in 2012 with the singular mission of creating 10,000 product leaders in the country. Ever since, the organization has designed and delivered programs in collaboration with various institutes, universities, and corporates to help senior working professionals make career transitions into product leadership. The Institute has also built and developed a community of over 4,000 plus successful alumni leading the data, product, and design teams across the world. We're also knowledge partners with 250 plus organizations worldwide. You can find out more about the Institute and the programs offered on our website. Coming back to today's session, the session is on Beyond the Hype 10 Unconventional Truths About Product Success. Right? So, once our speaker for today has presented his insights, we'll open up for questions. Please keep your questions ready and you can post them on Zoom in the chat section. This session is also being streamed live on LinkedIn and YouTube. So, viewers on any of these channels, please feel free to post your questions in the comment section, and I'll share them with the speaker. I'd like to start this session by welcoming and introducing our speaker for this evening, Mr. Kapil Verma. Kapil, who's a seasoned product and business leader with over 22 years of global experience across the USA, India, and the Middle East, has held leadership roles at some of the world's most well known companies, including Amazon, Swiggy, Adobe, Make My Trip, and Namshi, where he served as Chief Product Officer. Kapil's expertise spans multiple sectors like e commerce, travel, food, tech, and financial services, where he's been instrumental in driving product led growth and navigating companies through both early and high growth strategies. He'll be sharing some unconventional and often overlooked truths about product success. We're so pleased to have you join us this evening, Kapil. Handing over the session to you.
Thank you for having me, Harleen. Great to be here. Can we start with that quick poll, Harleen?
Of course. Let me just run that. Um, Viewers on Zoom, you guys should be able to see a poll on your screen, right? Viewers on LinkedIn, I will post the Zoom link on the in the comment section. I'd request you all to join us on Zoom so you can interact more directly, and we can have easier communication that way. Until then, I request everyone on Zoom to please answer the questions on their screen.
Yes, if you can just go ahead and answer the questions. They're just two questions, just so that I get an idea of the audience today. Okay. Harleen, do we have responses from everyone?
Um, Yes, I think all the people on Zoom have answered. So I can end the poll and then share the results so everyone can gain an idea.
Sure.
Yeah. I hope you're able to see the results on your screen, Kapil.
Yes, I can see the results. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if participants can also see the results.
I'm they should be able to, so I'm hoping they can.
Okay,
Okay, I think
great.
we have a thumbs up. So yeah.
Okay, great. So I think it seems like we have a mixed audience across functions, across product management, engineering, and design, and then we also have different years of experience as well. Okay, cool. Thanks for those inputs. It's helpful.
Of course.
Okay, great. So let me share my screen. Again, welcome everyone to the session, and let me know if you guys can see my screen and hear me okay as well.
I can
Hardly,
see
I
and hear
cannot
you
see.
okay. Yeah, I can see your presentation too now. So yeah, and we
And
have a couple of
everybody,
thumbs up in the group.
okay,
So
great, great, awesome. Okay, so let's get started. So today I just want to talk about sort of 10 things which I have learned in my career. These are a bit unconventional, not so obvious learnings. I think I learned these the hard way, and the purpose of sharing this over here in this forum is so that you guys don't have to learn these the hard way. I made a lot of mistakes in my career due to which I got these learnings, and sharing them these learnings, with all of you over here today. Okay, so a lot of these learnings are actually based on my journey from a product manager to a product leader, right? And typically, like in this journey, there is higher complexity. So you go from managing like one product to a portfolio of products. You go from managing being responsible for a few KPIs to many KPIs, and the scope also changes. So you not only are you prioritizing the scope within a project or for a feature, but you're prioritizing across the roadmap, across several projects, right? So that's one axis in which the complexity increases. The second axis is context. The context also increases. So you go from managing few stakeholders to many stakeholders, a limited context, in your own area, to looking at the org-wide context, and then seeing how product strategy fits within that context. And then lastly, from execution perspective, again, you go from just short-term executing and launching features and products to setting a long-term vision and strategy. And also, like typically you would have a team, so you go from doing just the best job that you can as an IC to actually empowering others, and sharing like best practices with other product managers in your team as well, right? And in a nutshell, sort of your responsibility changes from delivering launches. As a PM, you are more focused on just getting the features shipped. That responsibility changes to delivering outcomes. And what I mean by outcomes are business results, customer experience improvements, profitability improvements, revenue growth. So as a product leader, you're a lot more responsible for these outcomes as opposed to just getting the features shipped, right? And three things start to become very, very important, right? The first one is you have to get it right. So make the right decisions, make the right calls, being very focused on what will truly drive the impact. Second one is aligning and inspiring stakeholders in engineering, stakeholders in design, stakeholders on the business side. Typically, do not have authority over reporting authority, at least, so influencing them. And the third thing is like thinking about the impact of the feature, not just launching the feature or the product, but thinking about the impact and delivering results as opposed to just delivering launches, right? So these three things become more and more important as you transition from a product manager to a product leader, right? And what I'm going to be doing after this is going to be sharing 10 learnings along these three dimensions mainly. So let's just get right into it. So these are the 10 sort of unconventional truths, as I'm calling them. The first one, it's a bit controversial, right? So we as PMs, we get the advice that we should talk to customers, we should understand our customers very well, understand their pain points, and of course that is good advice. That's right, but I think it should not be just that. So we should not just talk to customers, but actually observe them, and you will actually get a lot more powerful insights, better insights by observing your customers, using your product, right? So it's not an either or, do both. And why is this important? Because if you just interview customers and ask customers what they want, what are their pain points, customers will of course often say that yeah, everything is fine with the product, or especially true for mature products, right? you may not get many insights. Customers offers to say one thing in the interview, but when they're actually using the product, they might do something else. And then lastly, customers are not product managers. It's not their job to come up with solutions. It's not their job to identify problems. It's not their job to reimagine how the product could be better. That's your job. So if you rely mainly on just asking customers, you'll basically get simple insights, and that's where observing customers using your product. It doesn't have to be a product, even if you have not launched. If the customer actually has a prototype that they can use, and you're observing the customers using that, it's very very powerful. And that's when you start to see that where customers get stuck, what challenges do they face, etc. It's a very powerful tool to understand the pain points and opportunities. And I would suggest do a lot of these usability studies with customers to understand that. Yeah. So I'll just give some real world examples from my own experience with each of these learnings. So one example I have is from my days in Swiggy. So at Swiggy, which I'm sure all of you know, is a food delivery company. And back in the day, we actually launched this feature called Food Ready. Now, this was for the restaurants. My team was responsible for managing the restaurant side product, and restaurants also had an app. It was called the Restaurant Partner app, which they would actually use to accept orders and process orders. So we launched this feature called Food Ready on the restaurant app, where the restaurant could mark the order as ready, the food is prepared, right, on the app. And the reason we launched this feature is we actually wanted to understand preparation time at the restaurant. Before this feature, there was no signal for food ready, so we did not know how much time it would take for the restaurant to prepare the food. And by understanding the prep time, what we really wanted to do was to do assignments of a delivery person more efficiently. So what I mean by that is, um, previously we were doing the assignment as immediate assignment. So just imagine there's an order that comes to the restaurant. They take about 15 minutes to prepare the food. Our assignment logic was very simple, that we would actually find the nearest possible delivery person to the restaurant and assign them. And it was immediate assignment. And let's say the delivery person takes about 10 minutes to reach the restaurant, but the preparation takes 15 minutes. So now the delivery person is actually waiting at the restaurant for 5 minutes, right? And this actually wait time cost Swiggy some money. So it was like 1 rupee per minute of wait time. That was the cost to Swiggy for the delivery person waiting over there, right? So the goal was to do just-in-time assignment and improve the efficiency and the profitability. So wherein, in the same scenario, if you understand, if you know that the preparation time for this order is going to be 15 minutes, you would do just-in-time assignments of the delivery person. So you'll probably assign them at t equals 5, and they will take about 10 minutes again to reach the restaurant. And just when they reach the restaurant is when the food is ready, right? So the wait time would be 0, which is the outcome that we actually wanted, right? So that was the goal behind launching this feature, to understand the preparation time. So we launched the feature. It was great, but when we actually went to the restaurants and observed them using this feature in their partner app, what we found was the person on the restaurant side, they were just marking it food ready even before the food was actually ready. So after receiving the order, and the order would be being prepared in the kitchen, after a few minutes the person would just mark the item as ready. And so we actually observed this behavior across several restaurants, and we asked them why are you marking it ready? And they were like, yeah, it's just a button, we just press it, and we believe that if we press it is when the delivery person would come. So they thought this was a feature to this was a way to call the delivery person to the restaurant to pick up the order, right? And that's why they were actually marking it sooner, right? So the restaurant was not aware. The restaurant was using it inaccurately, which defeated the whole purpose of understanding the preparation time accurately. And then of course we fixed it in the sense that we gave education to the restaurant, we provided a lot of incentives to the restaurant to mark the food ready accurately. But we got this insight only because we actually observed the restaurant partners using the app and in real time using the feature. And that's when we got this insight that they're actually marking it inaccurately, right? So that's the power of like observing customers using your product. If he had asked the restaurants like what do you think of this feature, they would have said, huh, it's fine, like it's great, it's working fine. Here is like one more example from my Adobe days. So I was responsible for technical communication software line at Adobe, and Adobe Framemaker was one of the products. And this is a tool which is used by technical authors in various companies to author content, to create content, and then publish it to various formats like PDF, online, mobile. And this is like back in the day. Um, and this is actually a legacy product. Like this was a 25-year-old product even then, right? And so, how do you improve a product which already is so feature rich? There's so many features already in the product. And when we would actually ask customers, we would not really get like a lot of insights. They would say, yeah, it's fine, just improve the performance, or they might say that like here is a bug that you should fix. But we would not really get a lot of like good insights in terms of how we can further improve the product, right? We would not get much by just simply asking the customer, right? And again, so what I did was I actually like sat down with a lot of customers, and I just like observed them. I was in the background, then they were using Adobe Framemaker to author content. And one of the insights I had was an author would be actually working with like probably like 15 plus documents at the same time, right? So they had so many different files open, right? And so many different tabs open in the product. And it was very difficult for them if they want to switch to a tab and go to a specific file. They had to like hover over each tab to see what the file name was, or they had to go to the tab to see if it was the right file or not. And they would make a mistake and then come back and then try to find that file. So because they were working with a large number of files, it was very difficult for them to see like where the file was, which tab the file was open in, right? And that was an insight that we got only because we actually observed the customers. And we launched this very simple and effective panel in the authoring product, where as a user you could actually see all the different files that you actually had open. And so this could be not 4, but this could be 15 files. And you could like see the path, the complete name, and you could save files, you can save multiple files, you can easily switch to the tab from over here. And it was a very small usability feature, and it was very very well appreciated by the customers, by the users of FrameMaker, right? And drove a lot of upgrades for us as well. And again, the point is, we got this insight only because we were actually observing the customers using our product day in and day out, and that's what gave this insight. And there are a lot of other examples like that as well. So the point is, don't just talk to customers and ask, but actually observe them using your product, and you'll get a lot of good insights that way. Okay. Please, feel free to like interrupt me if you have any questions, if you have any points to add on any of these learnings as we go along. Let's try to make this a bit interactive. Okay, so I'll keep going. The second learning is, so we're all familiar with the Pareto principle, right? 80-20, where you have 20% of the customers who drive 80% of the revenues, 20% of the features which drive 80% of the value in a product. So I think the Pareto principle is actually not good enough. What I've realized is it's not 80-20, but you have to get to 99-1. What is that one thing? What is that one feature? What is that one value which really resonates with the customers? And it's the spark which will get customers to use the product and get customers to come back using the product again and again, right? So you have to kind of get to that one thing. I'm exaggerating a bit here. It might not be just that one thing, but the point is you really have to be very focused on finding that one thing or a few things which drive the most value for your customers, right? And again, I'll take the example of like FrameMaker over here. So, one of our clients, the biggest client that we actually had, a large American semiconductor company, right? And we were working on the new release of FrameMaker, and we were in constant touch with them in terms of as we were developing the product, understanding the customer's requirements, because they were the largest customer, right? And at that time, in the technical communication space, the space in which FrameMaker was, there were a lot of key trends that were actually happening, which were driving a lot of action, a lot of product improvements, and a lot of like upgrades to the new releases. Things like structured authoring, movement to XML, because the content was in XML, it was intelligent content. We could repurpose the content, you could do more with it. The second one was around publishing, being able to publish to multiple formats, including mobile. Smartphones and iPads and tablets were getting more and more into the corporate setting, lot more. We are talking about like, early 2010s at that time. The third trend was around translation savings, which is like, when companies would create this content using Framemaker, they had to translate it to like, tens of different languages. And translation costs were actually a significant expense for these companies. So, what are the things you can do in the product to reduce translation costs? So, there were a lot of these trends, and a lot of the investment was actually there. And we were thinking that some of these investments and enhancements in the product in these three areas would also drive this large customer, this American company, to like, upgrade to the latest release of Framemaker. And what we realized that actually none of this worked, right? So they were factors, but they did not really contribute to this customer upgrading to the latest version of Framemaker. What really worked was a very simple feature called line number, right? So having line numbers in the Framemaker document, I think, was the single biggest factor for this large company to upgrade to the latest version. And why was it important for them? Because they actually did a lot of reviews with a lot of different experts and reviewers. And being able to refer to line numbers was very critical, because the reviewer could say that, like, look at page 15, line number, whatever, 400, and make this change. And that was a really productivity and booster for them, right? So just adding that simple, and the best part is actually it was not a very high cost, high effort feature for us at that time. So just finding that out, what was that one thing that this customer really wanted, needed, drove, like, I think one of the largest deals, for us with this customer, right? So it's important to, like, find out what is that one thing that your customers want and drive the most value in. Now, of course, this is a B2B example where we're talking about one specific large enterprise. You might have a different situation in B2C, but in B2C as well, where you have larger number of users, not just one large customer, it's also important to look at, what is that biggest segment of users, and what is that one or two things which drive the most value for the users, right? So being hyper focused, really works. Any questions so far, or any comments, any thoughts on what I'm sharing?
Yeah, Kapil, this is Manish. I have
Yeah,
one question. So, you mentioned what worked for this large customer in the previous example. That was
yeah,
a line number. Could you help reflect on whether this light bulb moment of providing the line number, was it result of observation? Was it result of some research that you did? Or how did this
yeah.
come about? What led to that realization?
Yeah. Good question. So I think, you're sort of correcting the first two learnings, right? So in this case, this was something that we actually learned through the customer conversations, but we actually saw a pattern. Like, this was a large company. We had, like, hundreds of users, and what we realized was each author who was authoring this content in Adobe Framemaker would be collaborating with like tens or 20s SMEs at the same time to review the content. And we found this pattern in a lot of these conversations, that, like, having an easy way to reference the content using a line number would be useful. So this was not one of those cases where we had to observe the customer to extract this insight. This was something that we actually heard from customers, and we saw a pattern across various users in the company. But not to say, like I said, I also give examples of other scenarios where the customer would not articulate themselves what they want, and there you have to sort of read between the lines. Does that answer your question, Manish?
Yes, Kapil. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, so a lot of these things are not either or. I mean, think of, like, using them sort of together. And yeah, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, especially in this day and age where, attention span is so fragmented, and people will give only, like, very little time to an app when they actually use it. You have to give them the value very quickly, and you have to find that one thing which will, like, really, like, resonate with the customers and make them come back, right? That's the point. Okay, so next one, constraints. I think constraints are your best friends. I used to be afraid of constraints. I used to be worried about constraints. Hey, like, if we do not have this much investment, how would we drive outcome? How would we drive impact? If we don't have these many resources, how would we, like, show progress, and so on and so forth, right? And I used to be worried about that. And there is some truth to that. I mean, if you have more people, you can do more for sure. But not every time you need like an army of engineers or army of PMs to drive value and drive impact. So you should actually think of constraints as a way which will actually help you be hyper focused, like really prioritize the things that really matter and drive innovation, right? Because only when you have constraints, like you have to kind of think of maybe new ideas, new features, new business models, which drives innovation, right? And so use this as an opportunity if you're working in a constrained environment. Um, and even if you're not, I would say that, like, you say that, how can I do the same thing with fewer resources? Like, what are some of the efficiency hacks that I can do where I can deliver impact without really building a very, very complicated product, right? So use constraints as an opportunity to become very, very laser focused and become, I would say, like drive innovation, drive creativity in your thinking as well. To give you an example, we all know about Twitter, but Twitter was actually born out of constraints. It was spun off from a company called Audio. Audio was a podcasting platform, early 2000s, I think 2004, 2005 timeframe. And the CEO was Evan Williams, who was also then involved along with Jack Dorsey in creating Twitter. But it started off as a podcasting platform, and then, like, it was a startup, and then Apple came and they launched iTunes. And so as a podcasting platform, Audio and Evan Williams, of course, had this threat that, like, if Apple is going to launch this platform where people can actually host podcast, what is the value for us, a value that we can provide to our customers? And so basically, Evan Williams gathered his engineers, and they actually, like, did a few hackathons, and where he asked the team to come up with alternative adjacent opportunities. And the team came with this opportunity called SMS based microblogging. So they went from podcasting to SMS based microblogging, called Twitter. And that's how Twitter was actually born, right? In this environment, when the company was actually under an existential threat, there were a lot of constraints, and that's what led to, like, this creativity and, like, this new idea. And by the way, that's not a typo. That's how it was spelled initially, TWTTR, because I think Twitter.com, the domain name, was actually taken by somebody, and the team could not afford to purchase that domain name. So they actually, called it TWTTR. Even if you look at Jack Dorsey's first tweet, he says setting up my Twitter with the spelling. So my point is that Twitter was born in a time of, like, constraints. And to kind of give you one example from my experience, like, Namshi, which is an e-commerce company in Dubai where I worked as the CPO. Um, it was a very challenging time, when I joined the company. And the challenging time because, Namshi is a company based in Middle East, based headquartered in Dubai, owned by MR Group in Dubai. And after I joined, like, very soon after that, MR, who was the owner, decided to, like, sell Namshi for various reasons. And so, of course, MR was looking to sell the company, and they were not really looking to do any further investments in the company because they were looking to sell the company. So there was no real incremental investment from the owner. There was a lot of attrition in the team, so there were very few resources. Because of acquisition, a lot of people actually, like, left. And I think at one point we only had, like, a couple of product managers in the team. So there's massive attrition, and there was also, like, not a lot of investment in terms of, like, hiring and resources. So it was very, very constrained environment, if you will. That's where, like, we were thrust in as a team when I joined the company. And but I think it was sort of a blessing in disguise because it actually helped us or forced us to be very, very focused on what is the best we can do with what we had in terms of resources, in terms of investment, in terms of engineers that we actually had on the team. And I think because of that hyper focus, we were able to kind of, like, drive a lot of impact, although of course not at the same time, but over a period of time, right? because we could only work on one thing and one thing at a time. And so it was stepwise journey where we started with, I said, okay, the first thing we're going to do is, in this constrained environment, first of all, let's just remove defects. So any element which results in negative NPS, a lot of detractors, poor customer experience, let's just focus on removing those defects. That's our number one priority. And so you worked on things like, improving the return and refund experience for the customer, one of the biggest contributor in terms of detractors. The second one was around understanding delivery timelines and, when will my order arrive? So those kind of things, right? So we actually worked on those and improved the detractor, reduced the detractors because of these reasons. Only after fixing these, then we shifted our priority to say that, okay, let's look at the shopping experience and make that seamless. So when a customer, so Namshi is a fashion and lifestyle e-commerce company. So think of Mintra of Middle East. You can think, right? So when we think of shopping experience, when it comes to buying clothes, things like size, fit become very, very important. The content becomes very important. The ratings and reviews become very important. So we looked at all of these things which mattered to the most to the customers. And how we got these insights, basically again through observing the customer, talking to customers. And we said, okay, here are the three or four things which are the core elements of the shopping experience when somebody is doing fashion, apparel, shoes, e-commerce, right? And so we actually worked on improving those. And then the third thing we looked at is, okay, how do we move away from a very spend driven growth to a product led growth, which is more sustainable? Because we didn't really have a lot of marketing budget. And so we drove a lot of product improvements to drive growth for the company. And then at the end, we actually focus our energies on making the shopping delightful, which is things which the customer would not expect. These are not must have features, but these are pleasant surprises. Things like shop the look, where the customer could buy the entire thing, the entire ensemble that the model was wearing in the photograph on the detail page. They could just buy with one click, right? So anyways, the point that I'm making is these constraints actually helped us be very, very focused on one theme and one theme at a time. And because we were very focused, and we focused on the right areas to begin with, and we drove significant impact to the company in this very constrained environment. If we had unlimited resources, I think we might not actually be this focused, and we probably be chasing a lot of different opportunities, right, left, and center, which might have diluted the impact, if you will, right? So, so I would say embrace constraints. Okay, so the fourth one is think beyond product. I mean, your product is important, of course. You are the product manager. You are very attached to it, emotionally invested in it. But you have to think beyond that. You have to think of the entire ecosystem and how your product fits into the ecosystem, and that will drive a lot of value. I think we all know about the famous Apple ecosystem, right? Everybody is aware. By the way, how many folks over here are Apple customers versus Android? Maybe you can type in the chat window and Harleen can let me know, because I can't see the chat right now, or you can just shout it out. So how many Apple, how many Android? Harleen, do we have any responses?
Yeah, there are some responses on chat.
In the chat, yeah.
Okay, okay. So I'll just switch to the chat window. Okay, so two Apple, Android. Okay, I'm myself Apple. Harleen, what about you? Do you use Apple or Android?
I'm an Android user.
You're an Android user. Okay.
Yeah.
So, so Apple, I think, definitely the Apple users and probably also the Android users knows about this, walled garden where Apple, actually has this entire ecosystem of course, their devices, but they have, wearables now with, earpods and watches and accessories and smart home devices, right? And these products work seamlessly with each other. And so once you start become be part of this ecosystem, it's very hard to switch then, right? Because it's not just one product. You basically are there for the entire experience and how these devices work seamlessly with each other, right? And I am one of those customers, and it's very hard for me to switch out of the Apple ecosystem, right? I think, in fact, Apple generates more than one third of their revenues from like wearables, things like watch and AirPods, as well as services revenue, which is outside the device, the core device revenue, like the iPhone and the iPad. So, so there's a lot of power of the ecosystem, right? And you have to think about how your product and what is the ecosystem for your product and how does it fit into the ecosystem and how do you leverage the power of ecosystem in driving even higher impact, right? Um, Again, I'll give you an example from my own experience going back to Adobe Framemaker, right? So uh, when we thought of ecosystem and how Framemaker was used in this entire ecosystem by the users, that gave us a lot of different insights in terms of how we can create more value. So one of the ecosystem was, as I already mentioned, like authors, you know, um, working with other authors or subject matter experts, typically engineers, in creating accurate technical content, right? And the ratio would typically be 1 to 10. So for each author, there would be like 10 engineers or experts would be reviewing the content, and of course there will be other authors. So it would not be like files being shared over email, right? People would be using things like content management systems. And so once like with this insight, we said that Framemaker actually has to integrate with the leading content management systems, right? So it becomes very easy for a Framemaker user to manage the files which they have on the CMS and like collaborate with other authors and reviewers, right? And that gave us like a lot of like leverage and impact, because collaboration was a key work part of the workflow, a key pain point as well. And thinking of integration between FrameMaker and these content management systems drove a lot of value. Similarly, PDF based review. So the other insight was a lot of these experts did not have a FrameMaker license. They did not have FrameMaker installed on their machine. So how would they review the content? So we built this PDF based review workflow where we looked at the Acrobat ecosystem, that if they do not have FrameMaker, definitely they have Acrobat Reader. So we let them publish to PDF where they could just open the PDF, mark up the PDF with comments, and the author could very seamlessly import those comments back into the FrameMaker document, right? So simplified that collaboration without needing a separate FrameMaker, like a license on the expert computer. So thinking of the ecosystem and how FrameMaker was used with other users, other SMEs, and what other tech systems were there, ensuring that FrameMaker actually works well, drove a lot of value. Similarly, on the publishing side, I think I already mentioned, right? We have to think of FrameMaker and how it is used for publishing to multiple channels, print, online, mobile, right? And it was something which required a lot of like different plugins to publish to multiple formats. PDF was natively supported. So what we did was we actually like made FrameMaker a multi-channel, multi-device publishing engine where from the same source you could publish to multiple formats, and that drove a lot of like value for users and a lot of upgrades for Adobe as a company as well, right? And again, thinking of how FrameMaker is used when it comes to publishing workflow as well as collaboration workflow. So think about your product and what ecosystem it is part of, and how you can actually make it very easy for the users to use the product within that ecosystem and drive value is the point. Any thoughts here? Like, anybody wants to share anything on this point or about how their product and the ecosystem your product is part of? Anyone? Don't be afraid. Can make it interactive.
Hi, Kapil. This is
Yeah,
Manish again.
yeah,
So at Microsoft, where I'm the UX lead,
yeah.
what we're trying to do is something a bit opposite. I don't know, maybe you cover that part later, but there are multiple legacy systems which are, like a single solution based systems. And what we
Hmm,
had to do is, kind of a little opposite of what you show here,
hmm.
which was integrating like a lot of functionalities into a smaller product feature and building a platform out of it. So probably you cover that later, but as I said, it was from many to integrating into a one single pane of glass.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You have to look at it, your context, your specific space, and what makes sense. And so, I think a lot of these things you have to see, like, whether these learnings are applicable in your area or not. I think I'm talking more in general, and what I've learned is thinking beyond the product that you're managing and how it is working with other sort of like, products, tools, and ecosystems are built around the product. And if that is the case, can actually like, drive a lot of value for the users and ensuring that those things actually work seamlessly.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a little bit. So the initial sort of undertaking was for a couple of products, and that was
Hmm.
we were brought in as a team to address issues in that product. But then when
Yeah.
like you mentioned here, we saw the ecosystem, we saw like how are those dependencies, how are users traversing from one product to another, and there is a lot of pain point in that, and that is
Yeah.
actually what led us to um, decision like, hey, we need to kind of look at it in a broader
Simplified.
perspective. So I think that aligns with what you're saying here. The result could be different, but the basic idea is absolutely what you mentioned here, Kapil. So 100% with you.
Sure. Absolutely. So yeah, so definitely look at your context in thinking about how these learnings translate into your context for sure. Okay, next one. I'll just keep moving in the interest of time. So this is a bit of tongue in cheek. It's not about the product. I'm talking to like, people who are either product managers or interested in product management, and I'm saying it's not about the product. And what I mean by that is it's actually much beyond the product, right? And it's similar point to the previous one that your customer experience is determined by much more than how cool or how beautiful your app and website experience is, right? You have to think of ultimately the customer value, which goes beyond that. And don't think of that like you have launched a feature and your responsibility just ends. You have to think of the business hat and what will drive actually impact, and do not ignore the GTM aspects, right? And so what I mean by that is if you're launching a product, other aspects which are beyond the product, which are beyond your website, which are beyond your app, also start to matter. So for example, I think pretty sure like a lot of you would have come across this very famous Amazon flywheel. I think Jeff Bezos came up with it. It basically talks about like how these inputs build on themselves, and there's a flywheel effect which can sustain itself and like drive growth for the company. So in a nutshell, like start with a lot of sellers on the platform on the left hand side, which brings a lot of selection, a lot of assortment for the customer, which improves the customer experience. And if the customer experience improves, that drives a lot more customers to come to Amazon or to any other e-commerce site to purchase, which then drives, a lot more sellers to be interested in selling on the platform because there's a huge customer base, right? And similarly, the other sort of, cycle that you see along cost and prices is all about scale. As you achieve higher scale, more customers, more seller, you lower your cost structure, which results in like, you giving better prices to your customers, further improving the customer experience, right? So as you can see, like a lot of the other inputs which are beyond your app, website, features, the product that you have launched, things like selection, things like pricing, really matter in spinning this flywheel, right? And I'll give you an example from my days in Amazon. So I actually launched the Amazon Business Marketplace for Amazon in India. So this is Amazon B2B. We were targeting businesses to come to Amazon for their purchasing as opposed to B2C, right? And so we built the site. We actually had a very different experience for businesses to come and purchase on Amazon. Starting from registration was different, the homepage was different, the detail page was different. So we actually launched that, and like we launched that, and like it was giving us some traction in terms of like customers coming, orders, GMV, right? But what really drove, I think, the exponential growth was thinking beyond just this experience, this website and the app that we actually had built for Amazon, the business customers. What gave us growth was things like looking at selection. Okay, what products do we have on the platform, right? And we did a scale up in terms of hundreds of millions of products on the platform. What we did was we tapped into our existing base of Amazon sellers who were doing B2C selling, and we upsold them to become B2B sellers as well. And suddenly, like, we had a massive spike in terms of the number of sellers and the number of products that were there on the platform. Similarly, like looking at categories and which categories are the right ones for businesses drove a lot of value. Then coming to pricing and ensuring that a lot of these products actually had a different price for businesses. Fulfillment by Amazon delivery, which was faster, which was more reliable, drove a lot of impact. So by looking at these inputs, which are not sort of tech inputs, but more like business inputs, selection, pricing, getting FBA into the mix, was the thing that actually drove exponential growth for us, right? So again, going back to as a product leader, you are more responsible for outcomes and results as opposed to just feature launches. So think outcomes and think not just product, think actually the business side of things, think go to market, think of the entire customer experience, which I think goes beyond just how good your app is the point that I'm making. Okay, so I'll just keep moving a little faster, but do stop me if you have any questions or comments to add. The next one is just launch it, right? And research is good. I mean, you should do research, but it actually has diminishing returns after a point in time. Um, because research gives you hypotheses and ideas, but the way you validate those hypotheses actually by launching something and putting it in the hands of the customer. Only then, you'll actually get real learnings. So I think, in my experience, and I've learned this the hard way, sometimes I've waited too long to launch, but the sooner you launch, the better it is. You get 100x the learning by launching. Um, do not wait for your version one to be perfect. It should be embarrassing that your V1. If it is not, then probably you have waited too long, right, to launch it. um, your minimum viable product MVP doesn't even have to be a product. It can be like a landing page just to kind of get assess what is the customer interest in this product or service. It can be a video, like in case of Dropbox, the MVP was actually a video which they put, which talked about how seamlessly it would be, how seamless it would be for the users to sync their files and documents, right? So it doesn't even have to be a product. And although we're living in the age of AI, but I would say not everything requires machine learning. You can actually launch something faster and get started that way before you actually develop a sophisticated machine learning model, right? And there I actually have an example, again going back to Amazon. When we launched the marketplace, the B2B marketplace, we were actually acquiring customers for this marketplace. And we were actually using the typical channels, emails and paid advertising and those kind of things to make customers aware about Amazon B2B, and the customers could sign up and so on and so forth. But one of the insights we actually had was there are a lot of businesses which are already shopping on Amazon, right? If we could identify them and then tell them about this new offering called Amazon Business, then we can do it in a more targeted manner, and that will drive a lot of customers to be aware and come to Amazon and sign up for a business account. And how do we identify these customers? We said probably we can look at certain things, do they do repeat purchases? For example, if they're doing repeat purchase of office supplies and laptops, probably they're a business customer. Do they ship to a commercial address? Probably they're a business customer. Do they use an American Express corporate card? Do they use a business name in the address, right? So we can use some of these factors, these features, to assign a certain probability that this account is likely belonging to a business account. Now, we could have waited to build a machine learning model, but actually, we were a very small team. We didn't have any machine learning resources, we didn't have any data scientists, nor did we actually have the data, very, very labeled, accurate data to build a machine learning model. So, what we did was we built a very simple rule based heuristics model. We said that, okay, these are the various sort of factors, and we assigned certain weightages to say that, depending on these, will assign a probability to each account on Amazon, that is it a business account or not? Is it a business customer or not, rather? Right? And higher the probability, the more likely it is to be a business account. And we'll reach out to these accounts which are the highest probability. And we'll tell them about Amazon business offering. And this was very, very effective, right?
This actually drove about 70% of the customer acquisition by just building this very simple rule-based model. So, I think the right decision that we made was to actually go ahead and launch it and then see and get the learnings that way, versus waiting for months to develop a full-blown machine learning model. I'm not saying that the machine learning model wouldn't be the right answer in the long term. Probably would be more effective as well, right? Compared to a simple rule-based model. But the cost is like waiting too long before you actually launch something. So launch it faster, iterate on it, get the learnings, and move that way. I think that's a much better approach. And similar to this point, I would say, like, you as a product manager, basically you're a learning machine, right? Um, your job is to figure out what customers want, what works, what is not working. And this means that, like, if you really want to be learning, you have to check your ego at the door, right? You cannot be married to, like, ideas or strategies. You should be married or tied to the vision that this is where you want to get to. How you get to is something that, like, can change, should change based on what you're learning when you're actually putting a product out there, right? So make sure you actually have that hunger and desire to learn, to pivot, so that, like, you get to product market fit. And from execution perspective, I would say that focus on being great at one thing, so one target segment or one category, before chasing multiple things. And focus on inputs rather than outputs. Don't focus on just GMV. Focus on things like selection, pricing, customer experience. That is key, right? And again, in Amazon, we actually followed this approach. Our phase one was like a beta launch, where we had certain hypotheses in terms of which customers we're going to go after, what categories will we have, right? And we actually launched the phase one of the B2B marketplace to validate those hypotheses. And we had a lot of learnings along the way, right? And then we pivoted and then launched phase two of the marketplace, which was actually like a full blown launch. And we were able to drive a lot of impact through this phase two, because the team was actually like open to these learnings. The team was, hey, we are launching B2B for the first time in India. We do not know what's going to work, what's not going to work. We're going to start with something in phase one, drive a lot of learnings in really narrowing down who we should target, and get our phase two right. I think that mindset was actually the key why we were able to pivot and, like, get our focus right. So when we launched phase two, we decided to focus on SMBs as opposed to enterprises. We focused on horizontal categories as opposed to very vertical niche categories, and we got FBA into the mix. These are all the learnings that we actually had from phase one, due to which phase two was much more impactful. So I think the point is, your job as a product manager is to get the learnings, maximize your learnings at the lowest cost possible, and then use those learnings to make sure that, like, iterating and getting to product market fit. Okay, just last two, very quickly, and then I'll be happy to take questions. The next one is around stakeholder alignment, right? And this is something that, like, we all have to do as product managers, and sometimes it is easy, sometimes it is not, and sometimes, no matter how much data or insights you share with the stakeholders, it's difficult to align, right? So one of the sort of hacks that has worked well for me is, making sure that your stakeholders have get direct feedback from the customers. So what that means is, like, maybe taking them to customer meetings, or having them listen to customer calls, or if you're doing a user research or usability study, having your stakeholders, and stakeholders could be business stakeholders, could be your tech counterparts, have them join as well, involve them early, right? And sometimes it is a faster way to align, because if your stakeholders actually hear directly from your customers, they also, I think, will actually have more empathy for the pain points, and they'll understand why you're pushing to solve a certain problem for a customer, right? So use that wherever you think it actually makes sense. But I have found a lot of value in involving stakeholders early and taking them to, like, a lot of these, like, customer conversations that we do typically as product managers. And an example is, so Amazon Business. I'll just quickly mention that we the stakeholders were actually teams based in US, tech teams, and we were actually leveraging the global tech stack that they had built in launching the business in India. And typically, like, one of the areas of conflict that we always had with the tech teams in Seattle in US was, why is India different? Like, why do we need to customize this feature for Indian business customers? In their mind, a business is a business, so why do we need to customize, right? And I tried a lot of things, and it was not very effective, right? But what really worked was, I had done a lot of research with the customers. I had taken pictures of these customers, these business owners. I had recorded videos as well, and so I did a presentation in Seattle to these stakeholders, and I basically talked about what does an Indian small business look like, what is the archetype of an Indian small business owner, and how it is probably different from a US small business owner. So when they realize that, like, an Indian small business does not look like this is probably what an American SMB looks like, and it looks more like this, right? This was like an aha moment for my stakeholders, right? And they realized that, like, they were building for a very different kind of customer in India, and they actually had an appreciation for why certain things needed to be, like, different in India, right? And after that, like, whenever they came to India, I did take them to several meetings as well, which I think was very, very effective, right? So rather than just hearing from me, if the stakeholders actually hear from customers directly, can be a very, very powerful thing. Yeah. Uh, Harleen, how much time do we have? Can we go on for a few more minutes, 5 more minutes? I'm just wrapping up. Harleen, are you there?
Yes, hi. Of course, no worries at all.
Okay, cool. So just like last couple of things, we should wrap up in 5 minutes. So the ninth one I would say is have the courage to say no, and basically, like, it's all about prioritizing ruthlessly, removing distractions. Um, I think, and this is sometimes a mistake that I've made. Effective product leaders say no to more things than they say yes to, right? It's very tempting to, like, take on the next thing and the next opportunity, but you should be able to say no, and definitely say no to more things, to keep that focus for yourself and for the team, right? And an example I want to share is, from Make My Trip, from my days in Make My Trip, and actually, where we should have said no, but we did not, and I think that did cost us a little bit, right? So this is like, Make My Trip, homestays and villa segment. So I was managing the product for the hotels business unit, which included these homestays and villas, and we were actually behind Airbnb, I would say. Like, a lot of things we actually had to play catch up on, and we were working on those things, and this was an important category for us, right? And one of the things that we actually wanted to do was, there was a push that came to do launch a new feature called Request to Book, where as a customer you could not just book a property, but you had to make a request, and the host would then approve it. And this feature was needed basically for, for these, like, very, very marquee properties and heritage villas and, palaces, very high end properties, right? And there's a lot of interest from everybody to get these properties on the platform, and the host wanted this feature before they would come on the platform. But this feature was a very, very large effort because it impacted, all the different systems, from checkout, detail page, payments, etc. And we were just thinking whether this is the right time to prioritize this feature, because we actually had a lot of, basic things to also work on when it comes to this category. I think we should have said no at that time. We did not, and we actually added this feature. But I think it was a distraction for us at that time. It drove not as much impact finally when we actually launched this feature. And I think, so this is one of those areas where saying no earlier would actually have, kept things simple and kept us a bit more focused on the right areas, which were actually higher priority than this other feature, which was solving for a very, very niche segment. Yes, marquee properties, but a very, very niche segment in terms of the number of properties we could get on the platform, right? So saying no is very, very important. And the last thing I would say is, AI can be anything that you want it to be. It can be your analyst, it can be like your designer, it can be your developer, it can be your peer, it can be your co-founder, right? It's such a powerful technology which we have, and it's basically about how you use it. And output is a function of what inputs you provide. So think of leveraging it in all your workflows. And I think that you can use it across the product life cycle, right from discovery uh, to planning, brainstorming on product ideas, problems, pain points, writing PRDs, and then even doing analysis, coming up with experiment designs when it comes to launching the product. So the sky is the limit. It's up to you in terms of how you use it, but do use it. Do use it as a tool, as an assistant, to help you across the various stages of the product life cycle. And as I mentioned, it depends on the quality of input. And so the prompt that you give to the AI is what determines what quality output that you get. And I'll just quickly flash this framework. It's one of the frameworks in which how you should write your prompt. It's called the Create framework. But basically, the idea is you should be as specific and as clear in your prompting. The more specific you are, the better the output would be. Give the model time to think. So split your complex tasks into steps and ask the model to do it step by step, and things like chain of thought for complex reasoning tasks. And add personas, say that let's say you are a product manager on this team, or you are a technical co-founder on working with me on this problem, right? And so give it a persona so that it can act like that and can give you inputs like that person would. And some other best practices that I have sort of collected when it comes to using these large language models to get better output. Okay, so I'll just leave it there for a second, and then I'll just wrap up in terms of the key learnings that I've had. These are the 10 that we've talked about, right? Some of these are a bit, at least they were not obvious to me when I started, things that I actually have learned along the way. But if I were to say, if we were to take five things from this presentation, take away these five things. The first one is we talked about this focus, saying no, embracing constraints, and really being focused on the problem statement that you're working on versus avoiding distractions. Second thing is don't expect customers to do your job. Observe them, find unarticulated problems, find the one thing that the customers want, which will drive the most value. Um, get to direct customer interaction with your stakeholders. It can be golden in aligning them. Think holistically, think beyond your product, think ecosystem, and think what will drive impact versus just launching a feature. And the last thing I would say is just check your ego, be very open, be humble about learning about your customers and what works. Be curious, and always focus on learning and iterating on the product. So that's it for the session. Hopefully you found it useful. Just quickly, if you want to reach me, here are my coordinates, my email, my LinkedIn, as well as you can also book a slot with me if you want to talk about product, or if you're a founder looking for investment, or anything you want to talk on product. You can book a slot with me on calendly.com as well. Okay. So with that, I'll end the session. Sorry, actually, we went over by a little bit, but back to you, Herleen, and can happy to answer any questions as well that might be there.
Thank you for that, Kapil. No worries about, it going overboard, of course. We do have a few questions we have received in the chat box. If you could just wait in the Zoom chat box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see a question about how to understand the target customer and the pain point, how to understand the product being adopted by the market, how to understand value the product provides to the customer, how to understand the products. Okay, so there are a lot of questions there, and some of these are very, very broad questions. Um, so I think there's one theme around understanding the customer and the pain point. The second theme that I see is understanding Like, is the product being adopted? Is the product market fit? Um, so what I would say on the first one, right, understanding the customer, and we talked about it. There are a lot of different techniques. I mean, there is no one singular way. I would say, like, definitely do customer interviews, talk to customers. Like, I made sure that we as a team were always talking to about, like, 10 to 15 customers every week, and just, like, having conversations about their experience, about their specific pain points. So do that. Second is, as I said, like, definitely do a lot of usability studies where you can see customers using your product and get insights that way. Third, I think I would say is, like, listening to, like, calls, especially when the customer is calling. That means something did not go right. They were not clear about something, or they had a bad experience, and hence they're actually calling. So listening to customer calls, or if you have an NPS survey in the organization, looking at, what are the causes for a customer to become detractor, definitely are the three or four things I would recommend to understand the customer, right? Now the second question around how to understand if the product is being adopted by the market, and is the product market fit. So I would say this is something that, again, there is no formula for it, but I think a good test for me is if you see, like, high retention rates, where customers, when they use the product, they are actually coming back on their own to use the product because they see value, right? That's a good sign that, like, your product is being adopted by the market. If you just have to spend more and more money to acquire new customers and they don't come back, that is not a good sign, and you should actually dive deep to understand why that could be happening. Okay. Any
Yeah.
other?
I don't see any more in the chat, so I think we can. I don't know if we have any more from the people who are here. We'll give them a few minutes if they want to, ask any more questions. Until then, I would like to. One second. Thank you so much, Kapil, for joining us and sharing your wonderful and such knowledgeable insights with everyone here. Please accept this certificate of appreciation from the Institute's end. The QR code on the certificate will actually take you to the dedicated Hall of Fame page that's been created especially for you. We thank you for joining us and giving us all such wonderful insights.
Thank you, Harleen. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I see in Zoom that we have Manish who's raised his hand. So, Manish, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question, but I'll extend my thanks really to Kapil for being here today and spending more than an hour with us and sharing those nuggets. So really appreciate that. Thank you, and thanks, Harleen, for the invitation
Yeah,
to Kapil. Um,
my pleasure, Manish. Yeah.
yeah, so my question is actually pretty simple. It's like, what has been your experience with myself being a user experience lead? I'm asking, for that purpose, like, what has been your experience with the UX teams, and what are the kind of challenges you have with, say, the user experience researchers and designers? And if you could highlight, like, maybe a couple of points which you wish
Hmm.
would the team would understand from PM's point of view and kind of be more receptive to your perspective. Would love to know that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I'm glad you asked that, because as you were asking the question, I think immediately one thing that came to my mind, which I think, like, I've realized that I should actually have done better earlier on in my career, was um, the interaction with the user experience team. Like, you have to, like, up level it. So what I mean by that is the UX team should know the context behind why we are doing what we are doing, right? Why are we building this feature? Why this project is important? How does this fit into the overall long-term vision? Because I think if they know that, they are so much more effective, because they're not just, like, solving for a specific feature or building the user journey for a specific feature, but they're actually, like, keeping a long-term vision and a goal in mind, right? And I think it's the product manager's job to make sure that the UX team is actually aware of that higher level context, right? Versus a transactional relationship where they're like, no, we want to build this feature. Here are the requirements. Help me create the prototype or the designs for this feature, right? So And I think that's sort of a mistake that I also made earlier in my career, where with user experience team and in general, I would say with the stakeholders as well, make sure to communicate the what and the why, which is like, what we are building and why we are building and why is this important and who we are building it for, the customer. But the how part is something which the team should figure out. So giving that broader context and the long-term vision is actually very, very important. And I think that will actually drive even sort of more impact and output in that relationship between the product manager and the user experience person.
Yeah, thanks, Kapil. So I actually have typed out my question as well. So, like, can you maybe out from your experience point out, give examples of a couple of instances where you found it challenging working with UX teams in particular, like something that you wish they understood better or they had, this broader capacity of understanding it and trying to see from your perspective. Is there any specific example that comes to mind?
Yeah, I'm not sure about a specific example, but I think I would say along these lines as well that um, I think the onus is also on the UX team sort of to understand the bigger picture and the broader picture as well in terms of who we are building for, why we are building, how does the long term roadmap look like. I think one thing where I think sometimes the UX team can actually be more active is actually not just understanding this quarter's projects and what they have to work on right now, and versus asking the question in terms of, okay, what is our long-term roadmap? How do we see this feature evolving in the long term? Like, for example, if you're launching a new chat feature between customers and hosts, where the customer could chat with the host before they can book the apartment or the villa, going back to my make my trip example, it is not just about launching the chat feature. It's also about like how this will actually evolve later on. Like initially we actually will have chat. Later on, like customers will be able to upload images, or the host can also share images with the customer. So we have to support images. We have to support multiple languages because we're talking about India and not a global audience, right? So I think the UX team should feel free and they should definitely ask these questions about how do you see this evolving in the long term, because with that context they can do an even better job of building the user experience and getting the right experience in the designs for what we're doing in the short term. So that's what I would like to see a lot more of. And I think the
Got it.
onus is on both the side for the PM to communicate that. But even if the PM is not communicating, for the UX person to ask those questions to kind of get that bigger picture.
Got it. Makes complete sense, Kapil. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks for your questions, Manish. Thanks for all the participation.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
lovely evening.
Thanks for that informative answer, Kapil. I don't think we have any more questions, so I think we can wrap up, right?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, everyone. Thanks again, Harleen. Hopefully, this was useful.
Thank you.
And yeah,
Absolutely useful, much more than useful, Kapil. Thank you so much. I wish more PMs had this point of view.
great. All right.
Appreciate it.
Good to
Great.
hear. Good to hear. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Manish. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank,
Harleen.
thank you.
Thanks, Saif, as well.
Yeah. To our attendees, just like today's session, we host multiple knowledge sharing events. We have a few coming up in the next week. We have a workshop this weekend for, learning the art of negotiation and commanding your influence and worth. And then we also have a masterclass next week, which is about integrating AI into your product strategy. If you want to check these or other events out, you can do so by using the link that I will just post in the chat right now, right? Okay, great. Thank you once again for everyone for joining in. Thank you, Kapil. I'll make sure to send across the certificate across to you via email, right? Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights.
Okay. Thank you, Harleen.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of the evening, and I look forward to hosting you at future sessions organized by the Institute of Product Leadership.
Sure. Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.